My name is Diane. I'm 68 years old, and today is my birthday. After losing Frank 10 years ago, I've gotten used to my quiet life in our apartment. My son Eric and his wife Jessica are coming over for dinner tonight. I've been looking forward to this rare visit for weeks, hoping for a warm celebration. I never imagined Eric would look me in the eyes and demand I give them my home for their growing family. Before I tell you how I gave myself the most liberating birthday gift of my life, let me know where you're watching from and hit subscribe if you want to hear more stories about finding self-worth in your golden years. I met Frank when I was just 23, fresh out of college, and starting my career as an elementary school teacher in Portland. He was working at the local library, always setting aside new children's books he thought I might want to read to my students. What began as friendly conversations about literature blossomed into a deep, nurturing love that lasted 35 years until cancer took him from me a decade ago. We were blessed with only one child, our son Eric. From the moment I held him in my arms, I knew I would do anything for this precious boy. Frank and I poured everything into raising him. I remember staying up countless nights helping with school projects, driving him to soccer practice 3 times a week, and attending every single one of his games despite my exhausting teaching schedule. My career took a backseat to motherhood. I turned down a position as vice principal twice because it would have meant longer hours away from Eric. Frank supported my decisions completely, always saying, "Our boy needs his mother and there will be other opportunities." Those other opportunities never came, but I never regretted my choice. Seeing Eric grow into a confident young man seemed worth every sacrifice. The apartment we lived in became our sanctuary. Frank had inherited it from his parents, and we made it our own over the decades. Every corner holds a memory. The height marks on the kitchen door frame tracking Eric's growth, the small dent in the living room wall from when Eric's 8th birthday party got a little too rowdy. The window seat where I still sit with my morning coffee, the same spot where I used to read Eric bedtime stories. After Frank passed away, this apartment became even more precious to me. It's the only substantial asset he left behind, but more importantly, it's where I feel his presence. Sometimes I swear I can still hear his laughter echoing down the hallway or smell his favorite coffee brewing in the morning. This place has been my anchor during the storm of grief. Eric was always such a sweet child. He had his father's bright blue eyes and my stubbornness. As a little boy, he would follow me around the apartment, helping with chores and telling elaborate stories he made up. We were inseparable. On weekends, we would bake cookies together, his little hands covered in flour as he giggled at his own jokes. Those are the memories I treasure most. As Eric entered his teenage years, things began to change as they do with most adolescents. The boy who once couldn't wait to tell me about his day started responding to my questions with one-word answers. He spent more time in his room or out with friends. I tried not to take it personally, remembering my own teenage rebellion. Frank would reassure me, "He's just finding his independence die. It's natural." I supported every decision Eric made, even when I didn't fully agree. When he wanted to attend a college on the opposite coast, despite receiving a scholarship to the state university, I helped him pack and drove him to the airport, fighting back tears as his plane took off. I believed giving him wings to fly was more important than keeping him close. During those college years, calls home became less frequent. I'd send care packages and long emails, often receiving brief thank you texts in return. Frank noticed my hurt, but gently reminded me, "He's building his own life, honey. That's what we raised him to do." I tried to embrace this perspective, though a part of me always hoped he would remember the foundation we had provided. After graduation, Eric moved back to our city, but not back home. He found an apartment with roommates across town. I saw him mostly during holidays or when he needed help with something, a loan for a security deposit, advice on job applications, or help with his laundry. I was always happy to assist, grateful for any opportunity to be part of his life. Then, Jessica entered the picture. Eric brought her to Sunday dinner, introducing her as someone special. She was strikingly beautiful, with perfect posture and an impeccable fashion sense that made me feel underdressed in my own home. Her smile seemed practiced, never quite reaching her eyes when she looked at me. Still, I was determined to welcome the woman my son had chosen. "It's wonderful to finally meet you," I said, embracing her. She returned the hug, stiffly patting my back twice before quickly pulling away. Throughout dinner, Jessica spoke eloquently about her job in marketing and her plans for the future. She asked few questions about our family, but commented on several items in our apartment, inquiring about their value or origin. At the time, I interpreted this as polite interest. Their wedding came less than a year later, a hastily arranged ceremony at an expensive venue. When Eric asked if I could contribute financially, I didn't hesitate. I withdrew a significant portion of my retirement savings to help give them the wedding they wanted. The ceremony was beautiful but felt impersonal, with most guests being Jessica's college friends and colleagues. I was seated at a table far from the main action alongside distant relatives. After the wedding, the distance between us grew wider. Invitations to their apartment were rare, and when I did visit, Jessica would often be working late or have just stepped out. Eric seemed different in their home, more formal, less relaxed, constantly checking with Jessica before expressing an opinion. When Frank passed away from pancreatic cancer, it was the darkest period of my life. The diagnosis to departure happened so quickly, just 6 months from the first concerning symptom to the final goodbye. Eric came to the hospital a few times, but was notably absent during many critical moments. He explained he was swamped at work and would try to visit more often. Jessica attended the funeral, but spent most of the time on her phone. In the aftermath of losing Frank, I had to rebuild my life from scratch. The first year was a blur of grief and adjustment. I'd wake up reaching for him only to find his side of the bed empty. Making dinner for one seemed pointless. The silence in the apartment was deafening. Gradually, I found my way forward. I joined a grief support group at the community center where I met Nancy, a widow who became my closest friend. I started volunteering at the local library, finding comfort in the place where Frank and I first met. I took up gardening on my small balcony, finding peace in nurturing living things. Throughout this rebuilding, Eric remained distant. He called occasionally, usually when he needed something. Despite this, I kept him central in my thoughts. I updated my will, naming him as the sole beneficiary. I saved newspaper articles I thought might interest him. I remembered his favorite meals and prepared them whenever he agreed to visit. I held on to hope that our relationship would improve with time. I never spoke negatively about Eric to others. When friends would gently suggest he wasn't treating me well, I would defend him, making excuses for his behavior. He's just busy establishing his career, I'd say, or starting a marriage takes all your energy. Deep down, though, the hurt accumulated like sediment at the bottom of a lake, unseen but ever present. Looking back, I can now recognize the warning signs that appeared long before that fateful birthday dinner. About 2 years after they were married, Eric and Jessica began making comments about my living situation that should have raised red flags. During one of their infrequent visits, Jessica walked around my apartment, running her fingers along the bookshelves and peering into closets. "This place is so spacious for just one person," she remarked, not quite meeting my eyes. "We're practically bursting at the seams in our one bedroom." Eric nodded in agreement. "Mom, have you ever thought this might be too much space for you to manage? All this cleaning and maintenance must be exhausting at your age." At 66, I was perfectly capable of maintaining my home. I still worked part-time as a substitute teacher, attended weekly yoga classes, and volunteered regularly. But I smiled and assured them I was managing fine. These comments became a regular feature of their visits. Jessica would sigh enviously at my bay windows or spacious kitchen. Eric would point out minor maintenance issues, a slightly dripping faucet or a creaky floorboard, suggesting they indicated the apartment was becoming too much for me. "You know, Mrs. Wilson moved to Sunny Meadows Retirement Community last year," Eric mentioned during one visit. "She says it's like being on vacation every day. No cooking, no cleaning activities planned for you." "That sounds lovely for Mrs. Wilson," I replied carefully, "but I'm not ready for that lifestyle just yet." The hints became less subtle with time. Jessica began sending me brochures for retirement communities and senior apartments. "Just something to think about," she'd say with that tight smile of hers. Eric started mentioning friends whose parents had made the smart move by downsizing before they had to. One afternoon, I came home earlier than expected from a doctor's appointment to find Eric and Jessica in my apartment. I had given Eric a key for emergencies years ago. They claimed they were just checking on things, but I found them measuring the master bedroom walls and taking photos. "We were thinking about a similar paint color for our place," Jessica explained hurriedly. I pretended to believe her, not wanting to create conflict. Perhaps the most telling incident occurred at their apartment 6 months before my birthday. I had stopped by to drop off some tax documents Eric had asked for when I overheard them talking in the kitchen, unaware of my presence. "Once the apartment is ours, we can finally renovate the way we want," Jessica was saying. "That outdated kitchen has to go immediately." "Mom's pretty attached to the place," Eric replied. "But she can't live there forever. We just need to be patient." "Patient for how long?" Jessica's voice had an edge to it. "We're cramped in this shoebox while she rattles around in all that space. It doesn't make sense." I quietly left the documents on the side table and slipped out, my heart heavy with the realization that they were waiting for me to either move out or pass away. Despite these warning signs, I continued to help them financially whenever they asked. When they were struggling to afford the security deposit for their current apartment, I wrote a check without hesitation. When Eric wanted to launch a freelance graphic design business alongside his regular job, I loaned him the money for equipment and software. He promised to pay me back, but never mentioned it again, and I didn't press the issue. I bought Jessica expensive birthday and Christmas gifts, designer handbags, jewelry, spa packages, hoping to build some warmth between us. These gifts were received with brief thanks and quickly set aside. Meanwhile, my birthdays were acknowledged with last-minute drugstore cards or flowers clearly purchased on the way to my apartment. Still, I held on to hope. I told myself that Eric was just going through a phase, that the sweet boy I raised was still in there somewhere. I convinced myself that Jessica's coldness was just her personality, not a reflection of her feelings toward me. I believed that if I just kept giving, eventually things would improve. As my 68th birthday approached, I felt a flutter of excitement. Eric had called a week earlier to ask if they could come for dinner on my actual birthday. This was unusual. Typically, they would suggest meeting a few days before or after, citing work commitments or other plans. The fact that they wanted to celebrate on the day itself seemed significant, a potential turning point in our relationship. I spent the week planning the perfect menu. Eric's childhood favorite pot roast with all the trimmings, homemade rolls just like Frank used to love, and a chocolate layer cake with raspberry filling. I cleaned the apartment thoroughly, even rehanging the family photos that I had put away because they sometimes made me sad. The day before my birthday, Nancy called to wish me well. "So the prodigal son is gracing you with his presence tomorrow?" she asked, unable to keep the skepticism from her voice. "He and Jessica both," I confirmed. "I think they're making a special effort for this birthday." Nancy's silence spoke volumes. Finally, she said, "Just remember, you deserve respect, Diane. Don't let them make you feel less than the amazing woman you are." I appreciated Nancy's concern, but assured her everything would be fine. I think they're finally realizing family is important. People change, Nancy. "Some do," she conceded. "Just keep your eyes open, that's all I'm saying." I went to bed that night full of hope, dreaming of a warm family dinner and perhaps the beginning of a closer relationship with my son and daughter-in-law. The morning of my birthday dawned bright and clear. I woke up thinking of Frank and how he would always leave a single rose on my pillow on my birthday mornings. "Another year of being blessed with you," he would say, kissing my forehead. The memory brought both smiles and tears. My phone pinged with birthday messages throughout the day, from former colleagues, friends, from my volunteer work neighbors in my building. Nancy dropped by with a beautiful potted orchid and stayed for tea. Old friends from college called to sing an off-key rendition of Happy Birthday. By late afternoon, I had heard from nearly everyone I cared about, except Eric. I told myself he was probably planning to wish me happy birthday in person. Perhaps he was busy picking out a special gift or card. I focused on preparing for dinner, setting the table with my best china and linen napkins, arranging a small bouquet of flowers as a centerpiece. Everything had to be perfect for this reunion I had been hoping for. As the appointed hour approached, I felt a mixture of anticipation and nervousness. I changed my outfit 3 times, finally settling on a navy blue dress that Frank had always said brought out the color of my eyes. I refreshed my lipstick and checked that the pot roast was staying warm in the oven. Then I sat down to wait, my heart beating a little faster than usual. Eric and Jessica were supposed to arrive at 6. By 7:30, they still hadn't shown up or called. I tried calling Eric's cell phone twice, but it went straight to voicemail. My carefully prepared dinner was drying out in the oven. The candles I had lit were burning low. The knot of anticipation in my stomach had twisted into disappointment. Just as I was about to give up and put the food away, my doorbell rang. When I opened the door, Eric stood there without any birthday gift or card, checking something on his phone. Jessica was behind him, typing furiously on her own device. "Sorry we're late," Eric said, not sounding particularly sorry. "Traffic was a nightmare, and I had a work crisis to handle," Jessica added without looking up from her phone. "Some people have no respect for personal time." I swallowed my hurt and welcomed them in, trying to keep my voice light. "I'm just glad you're here. Dinner's ready whenever you are." As we sat down to eat, I noticed Jessica wrinkling her nose at the pot roast. "We're actually trying to cut down on red meat," she said, picking at the vegetables on her plate. "Didn't Eric tell you?" Eric shrugged. "Must have slipped my mind." I watched as they ate small portions of the meal I had spent hours preparing. Neither mentioned my birthday until I brought out the cake with a single candle lit. "Oh, right, happy birthday, Mom," Eric said, as if just remembering. Jessica echoed the sentiment with about as much warmth as one might say, "pass the salt." There were no gifts, no cards. The conversation during dinner had been stilted, with Eric checking his watch repeatedly and Jessica making several trips to the bathroom to take work calls. I felt invisible in my own home on my own birthday. As I began to clear the dessert plates, Eric cleared his throat. "Mom, there's something important we wanted to discuss with you." Something in his tone made me pause. I slowly sat back down, placing the plates on the table. "What is it?" Eric and Jessica exchanged a look before he continued. "We have some exciting news. Jessica's pregnant." For a moment, genuine joy bloomed in my chest. A grandchild, despite everything, the thought of a baby, a new connection to Frank, a chance to share my love with another generation, filled me with happiness. "That's wonderful news," I exclaimed, reaching across the table to squeeze Jessica's hand. She allowed the contact for a brief second before withdrawing. "When are you due?" "Early February," Jessica replied. "Which brings us to what we wanted to discuss." Eric leaned forward, his expression serious. "Mom, our apartment is way too small for a growing family. We need more space, especially with the baby coming." I nodded, thinking they were going to ask for a loan for a down payment on a house. "Of course I understand. I'd be happy to help you look for a larger place." "That's just it," Eric continued. "We've already found the perfect place." He paused, then delivered the blow. "This apartment." The words didn't register at first. I stared at him, uncomprehending. "I don't understand." Jessica jumped in her voice, brisk and businesslike. "Your apartment has 3 bedrooms. You only use one. It has that second bathroom we desperately need and the open floor plan that's perfect for watching a child. It just makes sense for you to downsize to something more manageable while we put this space to good use." "We've been thinking," Eric added. "There's that nice senior living complex about 20 minutes from here. Or you could get a small one-bedroom somewhere. Either way, you'd have less maintenance, less cleaning." I felt as if I'd been doused with ice water. "You want me to give you my home? The home your father and I shared for decades?" "Not give exactly," Eric said, looking uncomfortable for the first time. "We'd buy it from you, of course. At a family rate." Jessica was already pulling out her phone. "I've actually been collecting some ideas for the nursery. We'd convert your bedroom, obviously." She started swiping through photos. "I'm thinking a woodland theme. We'd need to tear out that old carpet and update the lighting." My hands began to tremble in my lap. They weren't just asking for my apartment. They had already mentally moved in and started renovations. On my birthday. Without even bringing a card. "This is my home," I said quietly. "Frank and I built our life here. All my memories are in these walls." "Mom," Eric said with a hint of impatience. "You need to be practical. You're getting older. This place will become too much for you eventually. Why not make the transition now when it can benefit all of us?" "Think about your grandchild." Jessica nodded. "Don't you want to do what's best for your grandchild? This would be such a gift to the baby. Room to grow up in a nice neighborhood near good schools." They were using their unborn child as emotional leverage against me. The realization was like a physical pain in my chest. "I need time to think about this." I finally said, my voice barely above a whisper. Eric frowned. "There's not much to think about, Mom. It's the logical solution for everyone." "Still, I need time," I insisted, finding a small reserve of strength. "This is a big decision. Fine, Eric said, standing up abruptly. But don't take too long. Jessica's already in her second trimester, and we'd need time to make changes before the baby arrives. As they prepared to leave, neither of them mentioned my birthday again. No well wishes, no thank you for dinner. Jessica was already talking about paint samples as they walked out the door. After they left, I sat alone at my dining table, the remains of my birthday dinner spread out before me, and allowed the tears to come. In that moment of raw pain, something crystallized in me, a realization that this was not a loving son looking out for his mother's best interests. This was not a family planning for their collective future. This was a calculated move to take something that was mine, with little regard for my feelings or needs. As the shock subsided, I felt something else emerging from the hurt, a quiet, steely resolve. For the first time in years, I saw with perfect clarity that I needed to protect myself because the people who should have cared about my well-being clearly had other priorities. I picked up the phone and called Nancy. "You were right," I said when she answered. "I need to keep my eyes open." That night was one of the longest of my life. Sleep eluded me as I moved from disbelief to heartbreak to anger and back again. How had my relationship with my only child deteriorated to this point? Where had I gone wrong in raising him? What would Frank say if he could see how our son was treating me? Around 3 a.m, I pulled out old photo albums from the hallway closet. I traced Eric's growth through the years. His toothless kindergarten smile, awkward preteen years with braces, handsome high school graduation portrait. I lingered over a photo of him at age 8, helping Frank build a birdhouse in our small balcony garden. His expression was one of pure concentration and joy. Where had that boy gone? There were fewer photos from his adult years. He rarely stayed still long enough for pictures during his visits. The most recent ones showed a man I barely recognized with a tight smile that didn't reach his eyes and stiff posture whenever Jessica was in the frame. As dawn broke, I made myself a strong cup of coffee and called Nancy. Despite the early hour, she answered immediately. "I've been worried about you," she said. "How are you holding up?" I gave her the full account of the birthday dinner, my voice breaking several times during the telling. Nancy listened without interruption until I finished. "Those ungrateful, manipulative—" She didn't finish the sentence. "Diane, you know I adore you, so please hear me when I say this. You do not owe them your home. You do not owe them your security. You raised your son, you supported him through college, you've given him financial help repeatedly. Your obligation as a parent has been more than fulfilled." "But the baby," I said weakly. "My grandchild. They'll use that baby as a pawn," Nancy replied bluntly. "They'll dangle visitation rights to get what they want from you. Ask yourself if they're willing to ambush you on your birthday with demands for your home. What else will they do?" Her words struck home. I remembered how Eric had used my love against me before, borrowing money he never repaid, asking for favors while giving nothing in return, knowing I would never refuse him. "What should I do?" I asked, feeling lost. "First, talk to a lawyer," Nancy advised. "Understand your options. Then remember that you deserve happiness and security too. Your life isn't over, Diane. It's just changing direction." After hanging up, I sat with my coffee growing cold, watching the sunrise paint my living room in golden light. This apartment had been my sanctuary after Frank's death, the place where I slowly rebuilt myself from the shattered pieces grief had left behind. The thought of being pushed out for Jessica's woodland-themed nursery made my stomach turn. Nancy was right. I needed professional advice. I called Sarah Jenkins, an attorney who had helped with some paperwork after Frank's death. Her secretary scheduled me for an appointment that afternoon. Sarah's office was warm and inviting with plants on the windowsills and family photos on her desk. She listened attentively as I explained the situation, taking occasional notes. "First, let's be absolutely clear," she said when I finished. "This apartment is solely in your name. Correct?" "Yes," I confirmed. "Frank left everything to me." "Then, legally, you have complete control over what happens to it. Your son has no claim whatsoever unless you choose to give it to him." She leaned forward. "Diane, may I speak frankly?" I nodded, bracing myself. "What your son and daughter-in-law did was emotional manipulation, pure and simple. Using an unborn child as leverage is particularly troubling. Before we discuss the apartment specifically, I'd like to ask about your current estate planning. Do you have an updated will? Yes, I replied. After Frank passed, I made a new will leaving everything to Eric. He's my only child after all. Sarah's expression was thoughtful. And given recent events, are you comfortable with that arrangement? The question hit me hard. Was I comfortable knowing that after manipulating me during my lifetime, Eric and Jessica would inherit everything I'd worked for? The answer surfaced immediately. I think I need to reconsider my will, I said slowly. Sarah nodded. That would be prudent. Now, regarding the apartment, what do you want to do with it? Setting aside your son's request completely, what would make you happiest? No one had asked me that question in a very long time. What would make me happiest? I thought about the apartment, filled with memories, but also increasingly isolated as old neighbors moved out and younger people with busy lives moved in. I thought about how quiet the evenings were, how the maintenance issues were indeed becoming more challenging to manage on my own. I don't know, I admitted. I love this place because of the history, but sometimes it does feel like I'm living in a museum of my past life. Have you ever considered a complete change of scenery? Sarah asked. Not a retirement home, as your son suggested, but perhaps somewhere that could be a fresh start. The idea was both terrifying and exhilarating. I'd lived in the city my entire adult life. The thought of somewhere completely different, somewhere without the ghost of Frank or the painful memories of Eric's childhood, had a surprising appeal. I wouldn't even know where to begin, I said. Start by researching what your apartment is actually worth in today's market, Sarah suggested. Knowledge is power. Then perhaps explore areas that might interest you. There's no rush to decide anything today. I left Sarah's office with a plan to contact a real estate agent for a market assessment and a recommendation for an estate planning specialist to revise my will. For the first time since that disastrous birthday dinner, I felt a sense of control returning. That evening, I opened my laptop and began researching property values in my neighborhood. What I discovered shocked me. Due to gentrification and a housing shortage in the city, my apartment was worth nearly triple what I had estimated. If I sold it at market rate rather than the family discount Eric had mentioned, I would have substantial funds to restart anywhere I chose. On impulse, I began looking at properties outside the city. I had always loved nature, but rarely experienced it living in an urban environment. Images of small houses near lakes, cabins nestled in woods, and cozy cottages in small towns filled my screen. One listing in particular caught my eye. A 2-bedroom cabin about 2 hours from the city, situated near a small lake with a community of similar properties around it. The price was reasonable, leaving plenty from a potential apartment sale for investments to supplement my teacher's pension. The description mentioned an active community center, hiking trails, and regular social events for residents. I saved the listing, not quite ready to take the next step, but feeling a flutter of possibility. Over the next few days, I continued my research, contacting a respected real estate agent recommended by Nancy's brother. Linda Barnes came to my apartment, conducted a thorough assessment, and confirmed what my online research had suggested. My home was worth significantly more than I'd realized. If you decide to sell, I don't anticipate any difficulty finding buyers, Linda assured me. Properties in this building rarely come on the market, and when they do, they don't stay available long. I thanked her for the information and promised to be in touch once I'd made a decision. After she left, I sat in my favorite window seat watching the city lights come on as dusk settled. The apartment felt different now, less like a sanctuary and more like an asset, something that could fund a new chapter rather than anchor me to a painful past. On a whim, I decided to visit the lake community I'd found online. I told no one except Nancy where I was going, packing an overnight bag and renting a car for the journey. The 2-hour drive took me through gradually changing landscapes, from dense urban sprawl to suburbs to rolling countryside dotted with farms and small towns. As I approached the lake area, something inside me began to relax. The road wound through pine forests, occasionally offering glimpses of sparkling water between the trees. The air smelled different here, cleaner, scented with pine and earth rather than exhaust and concrete. The cabin I had seen online was being shown by a local real estate agent named Tom, a friendly man in his 60s who greeted me with a warm handshake. "You picked a beautiful day to visit," he said, gesturing to the clear blue sky. The lake is at its best in this light. The cabin itself was smaller than my apartment, but felt spacious with its open floor plan and walls of windows facing the lake. A stone fireplace dominated the living area, and a wraparound deck offered views of the water and surrounding woods. It needed some updating. The kitchen appliances were older models, and the bathroom fixtures showed their age, but it was solid and well-maintained. The previous owner was a retired engineer, Tom explained as we toured the property. He kept everything in working order, just didn't bother with cosmetic updates. I rather like it, I said, running my hand along the pine countertop in the kitchen. It has character. After the tour, Tom offered to show me around the community. We drove to the community center, a large log building with a library, fitness room, and gathering spaces. A group of people around my age were playing cards in one corner, while others chatted over coffee near a fireplace. We have quite an active community here, Tom explained. Book clubs, hiking groups, volunteer opportunities with local conservation efforts. Most folks are retirees or semi-retired professionals who wanted to get away from the city but not be completely isolated. I was introduced to several residents who greeted me with genuine warmth. One woman, Martha, insisted I join their coffee group. We meet every morning at 9, she said. Best way to start the day, good coffee and better gossip. By the time I drove back to the city the next day, something had shifted inside me. The cabin and lake community had awakened a longing for something I hadn't realized I was missing. Peace, simplicity, and the possibility of genuine connection with people who had no preconceived notions about me. In the solitude of my car, a plan began to take shape, one that would not only secure my future, but perhaps teach my son a valuable lesson about respect and consequences. In the weeks following my birthday, Eric and Jessica intensified their campaign for my apartment. The phone calls came almost daily, always with the same underlying message I was being selfish for not immediately agreeing to their demands. Mom, we've been looking at paint swatches for the nursery, Eric said during one call. Jessica really thinks sage green would be perfect for the room. When can we come by to measure for furniture? I haven't made any decisions yet, I replied, my newfound resolve strengthening my voice. As I said, this is a major life change that requires careful thought. Eric's frustration was audible. What's there to think about? We're offering you a perfect solution. You get to downsize to something more appropriate, and we get the space we need for your grandchild. Jessica frequently sent texts with links to senior apartments or retirement communities, always with messages like, "This place has bingo nights," or "Wouldn't it be nice to have meals prepared for you?" Each suggestion was for a facility at least an hour from my current neighborhood, conveniently far enough that regular visits to my future grandchild would be difficult without their cooperation. One afternoon, I received an envelope in the mail containing ultrasound images of the baby. Jessica had written on the back, "Your grandbaby at 20 weeks, already dreaming of their beautiful nursery in Grandma's apartment." The manipulation was so transparent it would have been comical if it weren't so hurtful. They were using my unborn grandchild as a bargaining chip, dangling access to the baby as an incentive for compliance. Nancy was right. They would continue to use the child as leverage if I gave in now. About 3 weeks after my birthday, Eric called to suggest dinner at La Maison, an upscale French restaurant downtown. "Just the three of us," he said, "to discuss the apartment situation further." I agreed, thinking a public setting might keep the conversation civil. When I arrived at the restaurant, I was surprised to find not only Eric and Jessica waiting, but also a fourth person, a man in a crisp suit who was introduced as Bradley Cooper, a real estate agent. Bradley specializes in helping seniors transition to appropriate housing, Jessica explained with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. He has several excellent options to show you tonight. I felt ambushed once again, but maintained my composure. How thoughtful, I said mildly, though I don't recall agreeing to meet with a real estate agent this evening. Throughout the dinner, Bradley showed me listings on his tablet, all senior-focused apartments or assisted living facilities. Jessica enthusiastically pointed out features like emergency call buttons in every room and on-site medical staff, though I had no health issues that required such amenities. When the main course arrived, Eric leaned forward. "We've been patient, Mom, but we need to move forward. Jessica's already in her 5th month, and we need time to prepare the apartment before the baby comes." "My apartment," I corrected gently. Eric's expression hardened. Mom, be reasonable. You're living alone in a 3-bedroom apartment while we're cramped in a tiny 1-bedroom. It doesn't make sense. What doesn't make sense, I replied, is expecting me to abandon my home of 30 years because you want it. Jessica's smile disappeared. We're not asking you to abandon anything. We're offering to buy it from you at a fair price. And what would that fair price be? I asked, genuinely curious about what they considered fair. Eric named a figure that was less than half of what Linda Barnes had assessed the apartment to be worth. That's enough for a nice senior apartment with plenty left over, he added. I took a sip of my water, considering my response carefully. That's an interesting offer. I'll need to think about it. Bradley, the real estate agent, jumped in. I have a lovely unit available in Sunny Meadows. We could go see it tomorrow if you'd like. Thank you, but I'll be busy tomorrow, I said, standing up. In fact, I should be going now. Thank you for dinner. Eric looked alarmed. Mom, we haven't even had dessert yet. Sit down, please. I've lost my appetite, I replied truthfully. I'll be in touch once I've made my decision. As I walked out of the restaurant, I felt their eyes on my back. For perhaps the first time in his adult life, Eric was realizing that I wasn't going to automatically give him what he wanted. It was a lesson long overdue. The incidents became more concerning after that dinner. I returned home one day to find Eric's key no longer worked in my door. I had changed the locks after realizing he might enter without permission. He called immediately, furious. Why would you change the locks? He demanded. What if there was an emergency? The building has a superintendent with an emergency key, I explained calmly. And you're welcome to visit any time. Just call first. A week later, I overheard my neighbor, Mrs. Abernathy, speaking to someone in the hallway about me. Such a shame when they start to lose their faculties, she was saying. My mother was the same way near the end, so forgetful. When I opened my door, I found Jessica speaking with Mrs. Abernathy. She looked startled to see me. Oh, Diane, we were just talking about my grandmother. Such a coincidence running into your neighbor here. I wasn't fooled. Jessica was planting seeds of doubt about my mental capacity. A chill ran down my spine as I realized how calculated their approach had become. They weren't just pressuring me, they were laying groundwork to question my competence if I continued to resist. The final straw came when I returned from grocery shopping to find Eric, Jessica, and an interior designer in my apartment. Somehow, Eric had convinced the superintendent to let them in, claiming I was expecting them. They had measuring tapes out and were discussing removing a wall between 2 bedrooms to create a larger nursery. Fabric swatches and paint chips were spread across my dining table. The designer was sketching on a notepad while Jessica pointed at various features of my home. What is going on here? I demanded from the doorway, shopping bag still in hand. Everyone turned, startled. The designer looked confused. I was told the homeowner had approved this consultation. I am the homeowner, I said firmly, and I certainly did not approve anyone coming into my home while I was out. Eric stepped forward. Mom, we were just getting some preliminary ideas. You've been taking so long to decide we thought we'd help move things along. Get out, I said quietly. All of you, please leave right now. The designer gathered her materials quickly, murmuring apologies. Jessica took her time, making a show of collecting her things slowly. Eric tried once more. Mom, you're overreacting. We were just trespassing, I finished for him. Please leave Eric. After they left, I sat down on my sofa, my groceries forgotten by the door. My hands were shaking, but not from fear or hurt this time. I was angry, truly, deeply angry, perhaps for the first time in my life. They had violated my boundaries, attempted to manipulate me, and now had literally invaded my home. I pulled out my phone and made 2 calls. The first was to Linda Barnes, the real estate agent. I'd like to list my apartment, I said decisively, as soon as possible. The second call was to Tom at the lake community. Is the cabin with the stone fireplace still available? I asked. When he confirmed it was, I continued, I'd like to make an offer. That evening, I called Sarah Jenkins to arrange for a complete revision of my will. The next morning, I began quietly packing the items that meant the most to me. Photo albums, Frank's favorite books, the quilt his mother had made for our wedding. The rest, I decided, could be sold or donated. It was time for a fresh start. Over the next 2 months, I executed my plan with a precision that surprised even me. Linda Barnes listed my apartment discreetly, showing it only to pre-qualified buyers when I was away from home. Within 3 weeks, we had 3 competing offers, all above asking price. I accepted the highest, with a closing date 6 weeks out, and a clause allowing me to rent back the apartment for an additional 2 weeks while finalizing my move. Meanwhile, my offer on the lake cabin was accepted. Tom helped arrange inspections and connected me with local contractors to update the kitchen and bathroom. I made 2 more visits to the community, each time meeting more neighbors and feeling increasingly certain I was making the right choice. Eric and Jessica were relentless in their pursuit during this time. The calls and texts continued daily, growing increasingly demanding. "We need a decision, Mom," Eric would say. "The baby will be here before we know it, and we need to prepare." I deflected their questions with vague responses. "I'm still considering all options," or "I'm talking with financial advisors about the best approach." It wasn't precisely lying. I was indeed determining the best approach, just not the one they were expecting. Jessica escalated her tactics by involving extended family members. My cousin Margaret called from Arizona, concerned that I was refusing to help Eric and Jessica prepare for the baby. An old friend from my teaching days mentioned that Jessica had contacted her worried about my increasing confusion about financial matters. I recognized the pattern. They were building a narrative that I was being unreasonable and possibly experiencing cognitive decline. The most disturbing incident came when Eric arrived unannounced one evening with a man he introduced as Dr. Levine. "Mom, Dr. Levine specializes in geriatric health. We thought it might be good for you to have a chat with him." I stood in my doorway, blocking entry. "I already have a doctor, thank you, and I don't appreciate you bringing strangers to my home without asking." Dr. Levine looked uncomfortable. "Perhaps I should come back another time when it's more convenient." "That won't be necessary," I replied firmly. "My healthcare is my own business." After they left, I called Sarah Jenkins again, explaining what had happened. "They're laying groundwork for a potential competency challenge," she said, confirming my suspicions. "But don't worry, they don't have a case. Your decisiveness in managing your affairs actually works in your favor here." Sarah suggested documenting all these interactions and accelerating our timeline for updating my will. 2 days later, I sat in her office signing a new estate plan. The revised will left a modest trust fund for my future grandchild, accessible when they turned 25. The bulk of my estate, including proceeds from the apartment sale and my remaining investments, would be divided between a scholarship fund for underprivileged students at the school where I had taught and a local organization supporting widows rebuilding their lives after loss. Eric and Jessica were explicitly excluded from inheriting anything directly. Sarah included what she called a no-contest clause, meaning that if Eric challenged the will, he would forfeit even the indirect benefit his child might receive. "Are you sure about this?" Sarah asked before I signed. "It's a significant change." I thought of all the manipulation, the boundary violations, the attempts to make me doubt my own judgment. I thought of the little boy who once helped build a birdhouse with his father, and the man who now saw me as nothing more than an obstacle to acquiring property. "I'm sure," I said, signing my name with steady hands. "My son needs to learn that actions have consequences." With my legal affairs in order, I focused on preparing for my move. I hired a professional organizing service to help sort through decades of belongings. We created piles for keeping, selling, donating, and discarding. It was emotionally challenging work. Every item seemed connected to a memory, but also surprisingly liberating. By the time we finished, I had reduced my possessions by more than half. I arranged for a private moving company to transport my remaining belongings to the cabin, scheduling them for the day after closing on my apartment. Everything was coordinated to happen within a 72-hour window, minimizing the chance that Eric would discover my plan before it was completed. Throughout this period, I maintained the illusion that I was still considering my options regarding the apartment. When Eric and Jessica pressed for updates, I would mention looking into retirement communities or researching the local real estate market. They grew increasingly frustrated, but seemed to believe I was simply being slow and indecisive rather than actively working against their plan. As the closing date approached, I felt a mixture of emotions: nostalgia for the home I was leaving, anxiety about such a major change at my age, but predominantly a growing excitement about my new beginning. I had already connected with the book club at the lake community and was invited to join a walking group that met 3 mornings a week. Martha from the coffee group had emailed me several times offering tips about local services and introducing me virtually to other neighbors. 2 days before closing, I received a delivery, a beautiful handmade welcome sign for my new front door crafted by one of my future neighbors. The accompanying note read, "Looking forward to having you join our community, Martha and the morning coffee crew." The simple kindness from people who barely knew me brought tears to my eyes. These strangers had shown more thoughtfulness than my own son had in years. The night before closing, I walked through the apartment one last time. I touched the doorframe with Eric's height. Marks ran my fingers along the windowsill where Frank used to sit and read, stood in the kitchen where we had prepared countless family meals. I allowed myself to cry, acknowledging that this chapter of my life was ending. But as I wiped away the tears, I realized something important. I was taking the most valuable parts of this home with me. The memories would travel wherever I went. Frank's love remained in my heart, not in these walls, and the lessons I had learned about standing up for myself were perhaps the most precious gift of all. The next morning, I met Linda at the title company office to sign the closing documents. By noon, the apartment was officially sold. I had 2 weeks of rental time to finalize my move, but most arrangements were already in place. The movers would arrive tomorrow, and I would drive to the lake community the following day. Eric and Jessica still had no idea. That evening, I hosted a small farewell dinner for my closest friends in the city. Nancy, who had been my rock through this entire process, brought champagne. We toasted to new beginnings and lasting friendships. When my guests asked about Eric's reaction to my move, I admitted I hadn't told him yet. "He'll find out soon enough," I said, "and perhaps learn something important in the process." The following morning, the movers arrived promptly at 8. By 3 in the afternoon, everything I was taking with me was packed into their truck and on the way to my new home. I spent one last night in the empty apartment, sleeping on an air mattress Nancy had loaned me. As I prepared to leave the next morning, I wrote a letter to the new owners, a young couple expecting their first child. I told them about some of the happy moments this home had witnessed, and wished them joy in creating their own memories within these walls. I left it on the kitchen counter along with a small potted plant, new life for the new beginning of this apartment. Just before walking out the door for the last time, I texted Eric, "I've made my decision about the apartment. Please, meet me for coffee at Riverside Cafe at 1:00 p.m. Then I got into my car, which was packed with the few remaining items I was taking myself, and began the 2-hour drive to my new life. At exactly 1 o'clock, I was seated at an outdoor table at Riverside Cafe, watching Eric hurry across the street. He looked anxious, but also triumphant, clearly believing I had finally decided to yield to his demands. Jessica wasn't with him. Probably preparing nursery plans, I thought wryly. "Mom," he said, sliding into the chair across from me, "I got your text. I'm glad you've finally made a decision." I smiled. "Yes, I have. Would you like some coffee before we talk?" "No, I'm fine," he replied impatiently. "Just tell me when we can start the paperwork for the apartment transfer." I took a sip of my latte, savoring the moment. "There won't be any transfer, Eric. I've sold the apartment." His expression froze. "What do you mean, sold?" "I mean, I put it on the market, accepted an offer, and signed the closing documents yesterday. The new owners take possession in 13 days. Eric's face flushed red. "That's impossible. You can't have sold it. What about us? What about the baby?" "You and Jessica will need to find suitable housing just like any other young family," I said calmly. "I'm sure with both your incomes you can afford something appropriate. But, he sputtered, "where will you live? You can't just sell your home without having somewhere to go." "I've purchased a lovely cabin near Pinewood Lake. I'm moving there tomorrow, actually. The movers have already delivered most of my things." Eric's shock gave way to anger. "You did this deliberately, behind our backs. How could you? After everything we've done for you." The irony of his statement was almost amusing. "What exactly have you done for me, Eric? In recent years, I mean." He opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again, unable to cite a single example of his support or care. "Let me tell you what I've observed," I continued gently. I've seen manipulation, disrespect, and entitlement. I've watched you and Jessica attempt to pressure me out of my home, question my mental competence, and use my unborn grandchild as emotional leverage. That's not love, Eric. That's exploitation. We were trying to help you, he protested. You're getting older, and that apartment was too much for you to manage. If you were truly concerned about me, you would have asked what I wanted, not told me what I should do. You would have considered my emotional attachment to the home I shared with your father. You would have approached me with respect, not demands. Eric's expression darkened. This is about the inheritance, isn't it? You're punishing us. It's interesting that your mind went immediately to money, I observed. But since you've brought it up, yes, I've also revised my will. The majority of my estate will go to educational charities. I've established a trust fund for my grandchild accessible when they turn 25. You and Jessica will receive nothing directly. The color drained from his face. You can't do that. I'm your son, your only child. Being my son entitles you to my love, which you've always had. It doesn't entitle you to my property or assets. I leaned forward. The sad thing is, if you had simply treated me with basic respect and decency, none of this would have happened. I would have gladly helped you with a down payment on a larger home. I would have continued to leave you everything in my will, but you chose a different approach. Eric's eyes filled with tears, whether from genuine regret or thwarted expectations, I couldn't tell. You're choosing strangers over your own family. No, Eric. You and Jessica made that choice when you decided to treat me as an obstacle rather than a person with feelings and autonomy. I stood up, placing money on the table for my coffee. I'll text you my new address. Whether you use it to rebuild our relationship or not is up to you. You'll regret this, he said, his voice shaking. Jessica is already talking to a lawyer. We can challenge the will, prove you're not thinking clearly. I smiled sadly. Sarah Jenkins, my attorney, anticipated that reaction. She's documented everything. Your attempts to pressure me, Jessica's efforts to undermine my reputation, that unauthorized visit from Dr. Levine. Any challenge will only embarrass you and cost you money you don't have. I picked up my purse. I need to go now. I have a long drive ahead. That's it. You're just walking away from me, from us. The hurt in his voice was palpable. I'm not walking away, Eric. I'm walking toward a life where I'm valued and respected. You're welcome to be part of that life, but only if you can accept that I make my own decisions now. I left him sitting there, his coffee untouched. As I walked to my car, I felt lighter than I had in years. There was sadness, certainly, for what our relationship had become, for what might have been, but also a profound sense of liberation. The drive to my new home was peaceful. As the city gave way to suburbs and then to countryside, I felt the weight of decades of concession and compromise falling away. By the time I reached the lake community, the afternoon sun was casting long shadows across the water. I pulled up to my cabin, and sat for a moment, taking it all in. Martha and several other neighbors were waiting on my porch with a welcome basket and offers to help unpack. As we worked together, arranging furniture and unpacking boxes, sharing stories and laughter, I knew I had made the right decision. These people had no obligation to care about me, yet they showed more genuine concern than my own son had in years. That evening, sitting on my deck watching the sunset over the lake, I received a text from Eric. We'll be contesting the will. Jessica's father knows a good lawyer. I didn't respond. There was nothing more to say. 6 months later, I was fully settled into my new life. My cabin had become a true home, with a garden starting to bloom and regular gatherings of friends around my dining table. I had joined the community council and was helping organize the summer festival. My days were filled with book club discussions, morning walks around the lake, volunteer work at the local library, and quiet evenings on my deck watching wildlife. One rainy afternoon, I received an unexpected letter. Not a text or email, but an actual handwritten letter from Eric. The postmark showed it had been sent 3 days earlier. With trembling hands, I opened it. Dear Mom, I don't know if you'll read this, but I need to say it anyway. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for how Jessica and I treated you. I'm sorry for trying to take your home and for not considering your feelings. I'm sorry for being a terrible son. After you moved away, Jessica and I consulted with several lawyers about contesting the will. They all said the same thing. We didn't have a case. One of them, an older gentleman, took me aside afterward and said something I can't stop thinking about. He said, "Young man, I've seen hundreds of family disputes like this, and I can tell you that what you've lost is far more valuable than any property or inheritance." He was right. In focusing on what I thought we deserved, I destroyed something irreplaceable: your trust and respect. Jessica and I have separated. The pressure of the failed apartment plan, the baby coming, and the realization that there would be no inheritance created too much strain. She's living with her parents now, and we're trying to figure out co-parenting. I don't expect you to forgive me right away, or maybe ever. I don't expect you to change your will back or give me money. I just want a chance to try to be the son you deserved all along, your son Eric. Tears blurred my vision as I finished reading. It wasn't a perfect apology. There were still traces of self-pity and a focus on the material losses, but it was a start, a recognition of wrongdoing, a step toward growth. I called Eric that evening. The conversation was awkward and halting, with long pauses and careful words on both sides, but it was a beginning. We agreed that he would come visit me alone the following weekend. No demands, no expectations, just a chance to talk and perhaps begin rebuilding what had been broken. When he arrived at the cabin, I barely recognized him. He had lost weight, and there was a humility in his demeanor I hadn't seen since he was a child. We walked along the lakeshore talking about neutral topics at first: the weather, the community, the local wildlife. Gradually, the conversation deepened. He spoke about his separation from Jessica, the counseling he had started, and his preparations for the baby due in just a few weeks. I shared stories about my new life, my friends, my activities. I showed him the garden I had planted, the bird feeders that attracted dozens of species, the small studio I had set up for painting, a hobby I had abandoned during my marriage but rediscovered in retirement. Over dinner on my deck, Eric finally addressed the elephant in the room. "I still don't understand why you didn't tell us you were selling the apartment. You just disappeared." "Would you have accepted my decision if I had told you?" I asked. After a long pause, he shook his head. "Probably not. Jessica and I were so fixated on getting the apartment we couldn't see anything else. We might have tried to block the sale somehow." "That's why I couldn't tell you," I said simply. "I needed to make this change without interference or manipulation." He nodded, slowly. "I get that now. I wish I hadn't forced you into that position." Before he left the next day, Eric asked if he could bring the baby to meet me after it was born. "Even if Jessica doesn't want to come, I want my child to know their grandmother." "I'd like that," I replied, surprised by how much I meant it. A month later, Eric called to announce the birth of his son, whom they had named Franklin, after his grandfather. Despite our still fragile relationship, the gesture touched me deeply. 2 weeks after that, Eric brought little Frankie to the cabin for his first visit. Holding my grandson with my son sitting beside me on the porch swing, I felt a circle beginning to close. Our relationship remained a work in progress. Eric and Jessica eventually divorced, with Eric gaining shared custody of Frankie. Over time, Eric became a regular visitor to the cabin, sometimes staying for a weekend, bringing Frankie when it was his parenting time. Slowly, painfully, with many setbacks and difficult conversations, we rebuilt a relationship based on mutual respect rather than obligation or expectation. I never changed my will back. The scholarship fund and charitable donations remained my primary bequests, with Frankie's trust fund intact. But I did establish a smaller trust for Eric, conditional on his continued personal growth and responsibility. It wasn't about the money, but about recognizing the positive changes he was making in his life. As for me, the cabin by the lake became more than just a home. It became a symbol of my late-in-life courage. The birthday that began with such pain ended up giving me the greatest gift of all: the knowledge that I was strong enough to start over, wise enough to stand my ground, and deserving enough to create a life filled with genuine joy and respect. When friends ask if I regret my decision to sell the apartment and move to the lake, I always shake my head. "It was the best birthday present I ever gave myself," I tell them. Freedom and self-respect are priceless at any age. If you're facing a situation where family members aren't treating you with the respect you deserve, remember my story. It's never too late to set boundaries, demand dignity, and if necessary, chart a completely new course. Your life belongs to you at every age. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you in any way, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to hear more stories about finding strength in difficult situations. I'd love to know in the comments if you've ever had to make a difficult decision to protect your own well-being. Have you ever had to stand up to family pressure? How did you handle it? Your experiences might help others facing similar challenges. Share this with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to put themselves first sometimes. Until next time, remember that respect should never be optional in any relationship.